For decades, modern warfare has created a quiet assumption that if a nation has enough technology, enough precision, enough control over the sky, then victory is only a matter of time. A few weeks, perhaps. A campaign measured not in years, but in operations. Clean, calculated, decisive. And in many cases, that assumption has held true. But there is one place where that logic begins to break down. Not gradually, but completely. Iran. Not because it is the most powerful country in the region, not because it has the most advanced weapons, but because it forces a different kind of question. Not, can it be defeated? But, what would it actually take? And more importantly, what would it cost? If you look at the modern map of conflict, most battle plans begin the same way. Establish air superiority, disrupt command structures, advance quickly before the opponent can reorganize. It is a system built on speed and control. But Iran is one of the few places where speed begins to disappear the moment you cross its borders, where control becomes uncertain, and where even the most carefully designed plans start to stretch, slow down, and lose their shape. This is not a story about invincibility. There is no such thing. It is a story about friction, about the quiet, compounding resistance that turns a fast war into a long one, and a simple objective into something far more complex. Because sometimes, the greatest advantage a country has is not its weapons, but the way its land, its structure, and its preparation reshape the rules of the game itself. And in those places, the outcome is no longer decided in the opening move, and it unfolds slowly. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel. At first glance, much of the Middle East looks open. Wide land, long distances, the kind of terrain where modern armies can move fast and operate freely. But Iran is different. Once you look closer at the map, you start to see why. The country is surrounded by mountain systems that are not just high, but continuous. To the west, the Zagros Mountains. To the north, the Alborz Range. These are not obstacles you simply move around. They force movement into narrow paths. And that changes everything. Because an army cannot move through mountains the way it moves across flat land. It slows down, it stretches, it breaks into smaller columns. And when that happens, it loses something critical: momentum. In modern warfare, speed is not just an advantage. It is what allows one side to stay in control. But in terrain like this, speed disappears. Vehicles are forced into single routes. Convoys become predictable, and every narrow pass becomes a point of risk. The defending side does not need to be stronger everywhere. It only needs to understand the terrain better. And in a place like Iran, the terrain has already done half the work. Before any battle begins, the map has already shaped how it will unfold. Crossing the mountains is only the beginning. If a force manages to move deeper into the country, the terrain opens. But it does not become easier. It becomes harsher. Central Iran is dominated by vast desert regions, where conditions are not just difficult, but unpredictable. Extreme heat, dry air, fine dust that moves with the wind and settles into everything. This is not the kind of environment modern equipment is built for. Engines run hotter, filters clog faster, electronics become less reliable over time. And when those systems begin to fail, even small issues can cascade into larger problems. There was a real example in 1980 when a highly advanced operation had to be aborted, not because of enemy resistance, but because of environmental conditions. Dust, visibility, mechanical failures, things that could not be controlled. It was a reminder of something simple. Technology can extend capability, but it does not eliminate limits. In extreme environments, those limits appear quickly. Logistics become more complex. Maintenance becomes constant. And every kilometer forward requires more effort than planned. At that point, as the question is no longer how fast you can move, but how long you can sustain movement at all. And in places like this, the environment is not just a background condition. It becomes an active factor, shaping outcomes in ways no plan can fully predict. If the surface is difficult to control, then the next question becomes obvious. What if the most important parts of a military system are no longer on the surface at all? Over the years, Iran has invested heavily in building infrastructure below ground. Not just small shelters, but large, reinforced networks carved into rock. The idea is straightforward. If an opponent has superior air power, then anything visible becomes vulnerable. Bases, equipment, supply points, all can be targeted from above. So instead of trying to defend everything on the surface, you reduce what can be seen in the first place. Underground facilities serve that purpose. They allow storage of equipment, they protect key assets, and in some cases, they allow operations to continue even when the surface is under pressure. This changes the nature of targeting, because controlling the air no longer guarantees control over what matters most. You may be able to observe movement above ground. You may be able to strike visible positions, but what lies beneath is harder to track and harder to disrupt. It adds uncertainty, and in any conflict, uncertainty is one of the most difficult variables to manage. It slows decision-making, it complicates planning, and it forces any external force to operate with incomplete information. In that sense, moving below ground is not just about protection. It is about reshaping the battlefield itself into something less visible, less predictable, and far more difficult to control.
The target is moving south.
In many traditional military models, there is a central assumption. If you disrupt the command structure, the system begins to break down. Communication weakens, coordination slows, decisions become delayed. And over time, the entire structure can lose effectiveness. But not all systems are built that way. Iran has developed an approach that relies less on centralization and more on distribution. Instead of concentrating control in one place, it spreads capability across many smaller units. Each unit can operate with a degree of independence. Each area can respond based on local conditions. This does not make the system stronger in every situation, but it makes it harder to disable completely, because there is no single point that determines everything else. If one part is disrupted, others continue. If communication is limited, decisions are still made. From a strategic perspective, this changes how a conflict unfolds. Instead of a sequence of decisive strikes, it becomes a process. Slower, more fragmented, less predictable. And for an external force, that creates a different kind of challenge. Not just how to win, but how to bring the conflict to an end. Because when a system does not rely on a single center, it does not fail in a single moment. It adapts, it absorbs pressure, and it continues, often in ways that are difficult to track in real time. A global impact. At the southern edge of Iran, there is a stretch of water that looks almost insignificant on a map. The Strait of Hormuz. It is narrow, at some points, only a few dozen kilometers across. But its importance is far larger than its size suggests. A significant portion of the world's oil supply moves through this passage every day. Tankers pass through it continuously, connecting producers and markets across continents. That makes it more than just a geographic feature. It becomes a point of connection and vulnerability, because any disruption here does not stay local. Even a temporary slowdown can ripple outward. Energy prices react. Supply chains tighten. Uncertainty spreads beyond the region itself. This changes how conflict is evaluated. It is no longer only about territory or direct confrontation. It is also about how a situation affects systems that extend far beyond the battlefield. In this context, Control is not always about dominance. Sometimes it is about influence, the ability to create pressure without needing to match force directly. And this is where modern analysis becomes more complex, because the impact of a conflict is not measured only in military terms, but in how it interacts with global networks. This broader way of looking at events, placing them within a larger system, is something that platforms like the Rebuilt Timeline aim to explore. Not just what happens, but why it matters beyond the immediate moment. In 1980, a war began that many believed would be short. A neighboring country launched a large-scale invasion, expecting a quick result. On paper, but the advantages seemed clear. More equipment, stronger initial positioning, a plan built around speed. But the outcome did not follow the plan. What was expected to last weeks stretched into years. 8 years of conflict, with no rapid resolution and no simple ending. The reasons were not tied to a single factor. They were cumulative. Terrain slowed movement, conditions strained logistics, and the structure of defense made it difficult to deliver a decisive blow. Each element on its own might not have been enough, but together they changed the nature of the war. It became prolonged, costly, difficult to control. And that may be the most important takeaway. In modern conflict, outcomes are not determined only by strength or technology. They are shaped by how well a system fits the environment it operates in. Sometimes, the expectation of a quick victory becomes the first miscalculation. And once that expectation fails, everything that follows becomes harder. Stories like this are not only about one country or one war. They reflect a broader pattern, how assumptions are tested against reality, and how, in certain places, the map itself can redefine what is possible. That is also the perspective that the Rebuilt Timeline continues to explore. Not just events, but the deeper structures behind them. So the question remains, in a world where systems are increasingly complex, is any conflict truly simple anymore?